Professor, is it okay if we go about 5 minutes over time, or do you? Okay, I just want to
Yeah,
ask you
that's fine.
this. I'm quite curious
No
about this
problem.
question, given you're a cognitive psychologist. Psychoanalysis. I've been fascinated by it for a long time, in fact, but more from a philosophical angle. And in fact, I got into it through philosophy. And this the late Mary Rudy, who was working in an English department, in fact. So it certainly isn't a science, but just as a cognitive scientist, what are your intimations and views on the field of psychoanalysis?
Um, I'm not as educated as I would want to be. Um, there are definitely some very concrete empirical criticism of Freud that I think are very well placed about the falsifiability of his proposal and its empirical adequacy and all that. All this criticism is very well placed. But I think he was a genius. I think he gave cognitive science two of its most precious ideas. Um, the first is the idea of the subconscious. I mean, I don't know the history of ideas sufficiently to know whether we should really credit him for that, but certainly he got it right. This is certainly the core of everything that's interesting about cognition generally and language specifically happens totally under the hood. It's not something that people capture, and he had the stature to have this insight, and I think this is very significant, and we owe him a debt of gratitude. The other debt of gratitude that I think is important, and people sometimes look at that as they take it against him, and I don't, was this notion that thinking about the psyche in physicalist terms. So he had this thermodynamic notion of the psyche. And people say, oh, yeah, you always apply the latest in science to study the psyche, but it is not trivial to think about the psyche as a physical system because we are dualist. So this is the farthest from us to think that one can explain psychological processes in physical terms. But this is exactly the basis of the computational theory of mind, the notion that the reason that thinking is a mechanical process that manipulates this form of representations. And this notion that you can think about the psyche as a physical system is brilliant, not something that's available to us intuitively at all. So I think Freud had two very big ideas that again, I leave it to somebody else to make the analysis of where these ideas came from and how they stayed with us. But for nothing else, I think that these are really one of the most important ideas that stay with us these days, and that we should be very grateful for them.
Certainly, I mean, yeah, in line with this book, you'd say that at least Freud could go against his human nature and overcome the blindness to study the
Yeah,
psyche as a physical
yeah,
system. Excellent.
yeah.
Thank you for that, Professor Berent. I know that these are highly speculative questions, but they always do fascinate me.